When I was born, I have a stammer right now. They never bothered to take me to speech therapy. I had to ask when I was 15 to go as a Christmas present.
This is one example of a younger Pierre not being given the love and holding that he wanted, needed, and deserved. This is In Therapy with Alex Howard, a first of its kind series that places you directly in the therapy room. My name is Alex Howard, and it is my hope that by bringing you on the journey with us, you too can learn the tools to transform your life. This series we're following Pierre, whose life is overshadowed by a sense of unworthiness and a fear of rejection. Pierre has come to In Therapy to overcome his childhood trauma and to realize his true self-worth. What I've seen over the years with people is that the more they process and move through their rage, their anger, their hate, the more powerful they become in their lives and the less anxiety they have, because they don't need to compensate for the deficiency by going into their mind. So what I'm really saying is you need to spend some time hating your parents.
I was going to say that's easy, but actually it's not.
It's not. Join us each week as we follow every step of Pierre's journey, both in and outside of the therapy room. As well as the tools I give Pierre in the sessions, I'll also be sharing weekly top tips so you can begin to unlock your true potential. This is In Therapy. It's the day of Pierre's third session with me. And by this point, I have a clear idea of Pierre's history and the areas that he wants to work on. In many ways, this is where the real therapeutic work begins.
This coffee is for you. It's made lovingly by Jeremiah here. So
Thank you.
if it's terrible, you know who to blame.
I can spit it.
So yeah, how's your week been?
No, it's been good.
Yeah?
It's been good, yeah. Thank you, yeah.
Perfect. And how about talking to and inviting the sort of the younger part of you? How was getting into some of that?
That was really good. And this week I was surprised to see that I'm a lot more present. So for example, I noticed a lot more, how my body is tensed, for example. So,
interesting.
Yeah, I'm really surprised, how I feel it happened really suddenly, really. And just being present and just being present, but at the same time without interrupting the flow, so to speak.
Sure. Had you done stuff a bit like that in the past with previous therapists, or was that something that was new?
No, I just tried maybe a few things by myself, like after listening to podcasts or whatever. But no, it wasn't. I never did anything like that with a therapist.
In last week's session, Pierre and I worked experientially to help him get more in contact with his younger self and to explore how he relates to himself emotionally. Working this way is particularly important for Pierre, given the progress he has made understanding things intellectually and the need to deepen his realization in his body. Here's the session.
This week, this last week, I really noticed how much I made an effort to really connect with my inner child. And not just to talk to him, but really to listen to him. Sort of see life through his eyes.
Yes.
Really.
And as you listen, what did he have to say?
The impression I got was that my present self was like an older brother to him, and just really welcome presence, really. It was really good.
And how did he respond to that? So having that kind of brotherly care and interest, and also I think one of the things we talked about last time was just giving him space to be there
Yeah.
without talking at him or without having to do something,
Yeah.
like just having the invitation to have space.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of silence, so much so that I thought, am I making this up? Or what? So because I thought nothing was not happening, but I don't know. It was a weird, maybe because I've never done it before like that. So the temptation is to revert to my normal way of being, which is, I'm never doing it right.
Right. Pierre and I go on to discuss his homework from the last session, which was to watch a module from my online program, the Reset program, looking at the ways he disconnects from his emotions. If you'd like to find out more, please visit reset.alexhoward.com for a free 3-part video series. And as you were watching about the different emotional styles or emotional defenses, what came out as your particular strategies that you use?
Thinking about feelings. That's my specialty.
That's what you're the expert at. Yeah. How is it to recognize that? Like, because in some ways we can have these strategies and they somewhat just feel like part of who we are. Like we just sort of know ourselves, for example, as someone that does a lot of thinking, and then you get a spotlight on it and you go, like, I get that's something that I do, but I maybe didn't realize that I'm doing it as a way to try and avoid something else.
Yeah. Well, I got a bit scared because I thought, am I going to try and think my way out of thinking? Or, how can I, maybe what I did last week or 2 weeks ago when I was all right, let me feel whatever I'm thinking I'm avoiding instead of thinking about it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I think I'll try that for a while.
Yeah. And what about the other strategies? So there's avoiding and distracting, there's state changing, there's analyzing.
Yeah, state changing also.
How do you, what are the ways that you notice you do that?
Well, by, meditating, there's weed also. Mm-hmm. That was quite intense before.
And still a lot or less so?
No, much less so.
Okay. What changed?
The fear of, not wanting another addiction.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah.
And where else have you seen the addiction piece play out historically?
Porn.
Yeah. That's right.
That was the biggest.
Yeah.
That was the biggest state change.
Yes.
Really.
And it sounds like my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense is that those behaviors seem relatively well controlled at this point, right? Is that true?
Yeah. It's very rare when I think, when I feel the urge.
Yes.
And then I always think, right, what's going on?
Yeah. Okay.
Because then I know that it's a reaction to stress. It's a reaction to something.
Yes.
So now I can actually, it's like a jolt really when I think, something is going on. Something is going on, so let me see what.
And when you have that, hang on, stop, something going on. What did you do? Like you then tune into how you feel, or you analyze it, or like how do you get clarity on what's happening?
Well, I think for a change. So, I
good
think
recognition though. Yeah.
What am I scared of? That's the question I'm asking. Or what's bothering me?
Yes.
And usually it's fear.
Yes.
Fear of, facing my feeling or feeling my feelings.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I think a way to put it is that you learned certain things about feelings when you were a little boy. And some of those things we've already uncovered, and I think it'd be helpful to explore it some more. But certainly you learned that love and support could be taken away. So when you were taken away to the Caribbean and you were cut off from your grandmother and your auntie, that taught you some things around the permanence or impermanence, let's say, of that love and holding, you also learn that if things feel difficult, go to your mind. I'm curious as to what else you learned. Like, if you think back to particularly that time, I think you were 6, weren't you, when you went to the Caribbean? That what do you think you were taught about feelings and emotions, and whether they're okay or not okay, and whether you can feel them or not feel them?
Well, nothing was said, obviously, but I sort of deduced that there were not things to talk about. That nobody was there to listen. Oh yeah, I think that's what I've learned.
Yeah. And if was no one there to listen, what did that mean for your feelings?
I'm the only one I'm left alone with them.
Yeah.
To make sense of them.
Yeah, and notice what you just said, to make sense of them. Right? Not to just have them or to feel them, but to make sense of them, like to analyze them, to think about them. When we are not emotionally held as children, we don't have the support we need to be with and process the emotional impacts of life. This means we have to find ways to disconnect and to escape from how we feel. For Pierre, this has meant intellectualizing and distracting away from his feelings. The problem is you can't heal what you don't feel. And the further we get away from our feelings, the more impacts they have in our lives. This idea of meeting your emotions from your mind, there's a macro understanding, as we're talking about now, that's a fundamental strategy of how you meet yourself. There's then the moment-to-moment, day-to-day living of that, in a sense. I'm curious as to how that happens. Like, and this goes a little bit back to the homework around situation, feeling, response. Like how that plays out. Like, and maybe some of the examples that maybe you came up in the homework, like where something happens and there's a feeling, but then there's the disconnecting that can tend to happen. Yeah. Walk me through a bit of how that actually plays out.
It happens really fast,
right?
Because of course, you
got really good at it.
I got a lifetime of practice. As soon as something is uncomfortable, then I apply a layer of positive thinking,
right?
Blended with fear, because I can't think about that because it's going to happen. Sometimes, however, if it's resentment, then I quite like to stew in it.
Okay, so say more about that.
Well, with my former day job, there were very difficult times, and I rehashed those times a lot, really. Even the last 2 weeks, I think, during the break between, well, not the break, but the 2 weeks between the first and the second sessions, then I really saw myself thinking a lot about my parents, because I felt like by being here, I had done something wrong by exposing them in a way. So there was a lot of resentment that came up. Really, I've been thinking a lot about how I thought about it.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is I thought, okay, well, I'd forgotten about this. So I'm sure, with time that will leave my mind and body. But I just have to feel that resentment, actually.
Describe the resentment. Like, it's an interesting choice of word, and I feel like you've used the word quite deliberately. I'm curious as to like what the actual feeling of resentment is.
So there were 2 occasions. So the first one, I remember that when I was born, so my brother is 6 years older than me. So when I was born, my brother had a stammer. My parents took him to speech therapy. When I was born, and I have a stammer right now, they never bothered to take me to speech therapy. I had to ask when I was 15 to go as a Christmas present.
Wow.
Really. So is that resentment, thinking, it's just hurtful, really.
Yeah. As you talk about it now, I'm impacted by a child having to ask to be taken to get help.
Yeah.
And then it being wrapped as
My
a Christmas
mother
present.
had a stammer.
Right.
On my father's side, my uncle has a stammer. So, it's not like
they didn't know what to do with it.
And it's not like there was no money.
Yeah.
It's not like they couldn't afford that.
Right.
It's just that that's real, to me, that's another example of neglect.
Yes, I agree. What does the resentment feel like in your body? Like, what's the felt sense of it?
It's really weird. It's a bit like that candle there, which is made of cement or something like that in my chest.
So there's like a kind of hardness and tightness and rigidity to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it okay to feel that? Like to give that some space?
Well, I have no choice. It's there. So.
Yeah. Well, you do have a choice, because historically what you would do is go off into your mind, or you'd put a positive spin on it and turn it in. So you've got choices, and those choices are there. But I think when you say you haven't got a choice, what you mean is you don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the way I approach it now, I think, is more, it will dissipate or it will melt. It's just, I don't want to go over it over and over again and, and sort of bitch at my parents.
But there's a difference between going around in circles and moving through something. And where the intention behind toxic positivity has a point is what we can do is we can wallow, and we just go round and round and round. Often we do that in a narrative that often makes us the victim. But what we want to have happen is we're actually moving the feelings and the emotions that are there. We're not just sort of wallowing at the surface. There's actually a kind of a penetrating of what's there and actually moving through it. So there's a place in you that feels resentful. Sounds like it feels angry, it feels hurt, it feels rejected, it feels neglected. And you were describing it like a kind of cement candle that's there in your kind of heart center. What happens if you just, and yes, it may well melt given some time, but without that as an expectation or as a goal of what should happen, how is it to just let it be there, and just in this moment between you and I, just let yourself feel the place in you that feels really resentful and feels hurt?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's what I did, but or at least the way how I experienced it was, to tell myself I'm entitled to these feelings.
Yeah,
and I don't even need to justify that. That's just how I feel. That's it. Really. But there again, I don't need to, identify with it, or I don't want to talk about, to go and tell everybody about it. It's just it's there. Really, I don't. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, life goes on. It's there, but
life goes on, and this is an important part of how you feel. And this is one example of a very, very long catalogue of experiences of a younger Pierre being neglected, not getting his needs met, not being made to feel special, not being given the love and holding that he wanted, needed, and deserved. And anything less than murderous rage and anger is probably an underestimation of how he probably feels.
Yeah, I mean, how I deal with it, is more like breath work, tapping, or that's how I process it.
And that definitely has its place. And even those techniques sometimes can be used as a bypass, because it kind of gives us a sense of control over it, right? It's like, I'm going to move, and it really does have its place. So I'm not, what I'm saying is not, and I use and encourage those strategies. So I really, they really have their place. And there is a place that's even more vulnerable than that, which is to just let the feeling be there without an expectation or a strategy or a kind of goal to do something with it. And sometimes the younger wounded places in us, what they really want is just to be allowed to have the feeling. Because the way you have to think about it is that for the little boy, those feelings were so scary because there was no support to be able to have them. And so if he really let himself have those feelings, the fear is that he would have been annihilated, that he would have been completely rejected, or he would have been drowned in the emotion. So anger wasn't just anger. Anger was dangerous. Sadness wasn't just sadness. Sadness was a risk of, and part of the updating that's happening, I think, been happening over recent years, is that they are just emotions, but they're important. And you can't shut yourself down emotionally selectively. So you can't shut down your anger without shutting down your personal power, because they're the same. It's the same energy. They're just different uses of it. You can't shut down your sadness without shutting down your capacity for love, because the risk of love is that you may have sadness. And so what happens is we shut down certain emotions and feelings, but we pay a much bigger price than we often realize, because we shut down that whole category of capacity. Yeah. Part of the antidote to fear is really having access to your power and your strength, because the fear is often a compensation that I don't have what it takes to meet this experience. And if you've really got your power and your strength, there's less need for the fear. But to get your power and your strength, you got to process your hate and your rage, because hate and rage is the same. It's the same life force. It's just a kind of destructive version of it rather than a creative version of it. But it's the same life force. And so what I've seen over the years of people is that the more they process and move through their rage, their anger, their hate, the more powerful they become in their lives, and the less anxiety they have, because they don't need to compensate for the deficiency by going into their mind. So what I'm really saying is you need to spend some time hating your parents.
Okay.
That's the heart of what we're saying.
Yeah. I was going to say that's easy, but actually it's not.
It's not. Because your parents likely had all their own traumas going on. And your parents ultimately, I believe, did love you. So on one level, they did the best they could. They loved you. They cared for you. They just were unskillful and unavailable. And it's therefore a pathway of forgiveness and compassion. But that's the easier journey to go to, because that's more of a cognitive journey of kind of taking different perspectives and understanding. So my invitation to you and we'll talk more in a minute about how this works, but to go into and allow yourself to have the anger, the hatred, the rage, the hurt, the disappointment, and all of that doesn't negate this other truth, doesn't negate the fact that there was love and they did love you and they did do what they thought was right and what they thought was best. It's just, if you stay too much in that place at the moment, it's difficult to really feel the hatred and the rage and the anger. But I'm the first one to call out people that have come out of therapeutic work and not come to that place of reflection. And all they've basically done is just stay in a place of anger and rage and hatred. And then their whole life story becomes, my life shit's because of my parents. So it's not about this being a destination. It's about this being the portal through which to move to to the deeper truth of it.
Mm.
One of the complexities of doing inner work is that sometimes two contradictory things can be true. As adults, we can understand that our parents likely did the best they knew how to do. And even though they may not have had all the skills and resources they needed, it had nothing to do with their actual love for us. However, for our younger self, it is important to be allowed to have our emotions. These are often the true feelings we had at certain points in childhood, but didn't feel safe enough to fully process. So it won't surprise you that I've got some homework for you. I'll put this in email to you later, but the essence of it is I want you to spend some time between now and next week exploring hatred and anger. And specifically what you historically, and it can be present or historic, but particularly I'm thinking about childhood, just because that's where all of this got set up. But what you would have or could have felt hate and anger and rage about if you'd known how to and if you'd been allowed to. Because if the question is, what did you feel hate and anger about? Well, I didn't. So it's more trying to unpick some of the circumstances, some of the events. So things that you've already shared with me, for example, the being taken away from Paris to the Caribbean when you were 6. That's something that feeling hate and anger about that. Not being taken to a speech therapist. That's like, so it's what are some of those events to give some more clarity and voice around that. And you can use your head for this bit, so that just really take some time to kind of to think about it. And then the next part is how you, and then it's actually a situation, feeling, response. It's how do you feel about it now, and what are you doing with that feeling? So how you feel about it now might be I feel numb, or I don't feel anything, or I feel triggered by it, or I feel scared by it. So, but what is it that comes up? And then what do you do in response to that? So the trajectory of the homework is to give more space to your history around anger, hatred, and rage. And if you find different ways into it, that's fine. I'm just trying to give you a bit of a vehicle to play with it. But I'm also, it might be you get home and go, fuck that. And you find another way into it, and that's fine.
Well, I mean, at the moment, it looks like it was always about not feeling in control.
Yeah.
What I mean by not feeling in control is that, if I had been older, then I could have done it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were neglected. You didn't have the loving, let me rephrase that. You didn't have the emotionally available parent to be able to hold you and meet those needs.
Actually, I mean, so far, my first memory is being pissed off at being a baby. Actually,
right.
So,
because
I was in a bath with like 1 inch of water, and I was really pissed off because I thought, see, if I was older, I would have been in a proper bath with water up to here. And I felt limited.
Yeah. You're right on it. Keep going. That's the homework.
All right.
Yeah. No, that's a great example. Do you have any questions for me?
Not yet.
Okay. Does that feel okay in terms of what to sit with and what to be with?
Yeah. I'm sure I'll manage.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll keep going next week.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Our emotions represent our personal power. By shutting down or distracting away from them, we place chains on our potential and our gifts to the world. As Pierre begins to access his anger and sadness from his past, he is unlocking a new, stronger version of himself for the future. And this is a journey that we can't just do in our minds. We can't think our way to healing and forgiveness with our past. We have to heal our way to it. And that means making contact with and truly processing the emotional impacts of our past. And that is a key part of Pierre's and my work together. So continue to follow Pierre's journey over the coming weeks as we release weekly episodes of his sessions with me. You can watch here on YouTube or listen to the episodes as a podcast. To help support you in coming on the journey with us, I've created some materials to accompany the series. Each week, there is a bonus video with me and a worksheet to bring the session to life for you. In this week's reflections, I invite you to explore how you truly feel about the impacts of your childhood and how you can begin to process them. You can find these resources for free at intherapy.alexhoward.com. Here's what's coming up next week.
Then she started hitting me. At first, he was like pulling my ear, and then it was the slaps, and then it was the punching, and then she got the whip out.
And was that something she'd done before?
No.